Right guys, after all the midweek action, we are back again for some more Championship score predictions to preview all the games we've got coming up this weekend. Honestly, with the amount of draws we've had over the last 2 weeks, I sort of feel like just calling this video short, predicting 12 draws and moving on. As always, do drop your score predictions in the comments down below. Hopefully we don't get as many draws this weekend, but let's wait and see. Without any further ado, let's jump in. Starting out on Friday with the Hollywood Derby, as the media have coined this one, for Wrexham up against Birmingham. It's an interesting matchup because Wrexham are still looking for their first home win of this season, and Birmingham have lost their last 2 games on the road. Blues coming off the back of a 2-2 draw with Sheff Wednesday in midweek. While they did rescue a late point in that game, really wasn't a performance to write home about, and it still feels like Chris Davis maybe hasn't worked out what his best 11 is yet. Obviously a lot of players came in over the summer and there's still not quite that cohesion between attack and defence, and in defence they have looked quite vulnerable over these past few weeks. Wrexham, I think it was a solid point for them in midweek, to be fair, away at Leicester. Nice goal from Nathan Broadhead to get them back into it in the second half. I think they've shown that they're willing to give up the ball in quite a few of their away matches especially, but do have that quality even coming off the bench to make a difference in these sorts of matches. It's just defensively about them, I still have a few reservations as well. Honestly, this one could go either way. I just think that Wrexham have to get that first home win of the season eventually. Maybe it comes in a big game like this. I'm going to go 2-1 Wrexham. Why not? I was pretty underwhelmed by Birmingham in midweek, it has to be said. Next up, into the first of the Saturday 12:30 kickoffs, we're going to Ewood Park for Blackburn up against Stoke. Blackburn coming off the back of consecutive defeats. I did think they were better in midweek against Swansea than they were over the weekend away at Charlton, but the outcome was ultimately the same. That second goal especially was really poor defensively from Blackburn, and this won't be easy against a Stoke side who have looked very solid, albeit a Stoke side where the goals maybe have dried up a little bit in recent weeks. They've only scored 2 goals in their last 5 matches. A solid point nonetheless in midweek away at Middlesbrough. That one finished goalless. It's consecutive draws for Stoke, and this game finishing level would not surprise me. I just think that in terms of reliability, you can bank on Stoke a little bit more right now to come into this game and look solid, whereas Blackburn, you don't quite know what team's going to show up week to week, and with Blackburn not tending to draw many matches, I'm going to go 1-0 Stoke on the road in this game. Back the Potters to get back to winning ways there. After that, to Hull up against Sheffield United. I watched Hull over the full 90 minutes in midweek as they came up against my side, North End, and it was a really contrasting performance from the first 45 minutes to the second 45. Quite similarly to how Hull were against Watford, actually. First 45 minutes, I thought Hull were absolutely dreadful in that game. They were booed off the pitch, looked so passive and vulnerable defensively, but then the changes that Sergei Okirovic made at half-time had the desired effect, and obviously got back into that game thanks to 2 goals from Ollie McBurney, both set up by Ryan Giles. McBurney, by the way, hands down got to be one of the most informed players in the league right now, and going up against his former side in Sheff United in this game, you'd fancy him for a goal or 2, that's for sure. It's a difficult prediction to make because you just don't know which version of Hull is going to show up to this game. If the Hull that played Preston in the first 45 minutes comes into this one, I'd fancy Sheff United to get something. If the Hull of the second half comes up for this game, you'd fancy them for 2 or 3 goals. From a Sheffield United perspective, I actually think that performance-wise, midweek against Southampton, probably the best they played all season. Obviously, they didn't get the rub of the green in the end with some key decisions going against them, and that wonder goal from Ross Stewart, the second that he scored. But there were more positives than negatives to take from that game, performance-wise, in my opinion. However, it does still feel like a side that is lacking confidence right now. In the final third, like in this game, I'd back them to get into some very good positions against this Hull defence that has looked incredibly shaky in recent weeks, but whether Sheff United actually take those chances is another question. Honestly, I could really see this one going either way. I just think that Ollie McBurney's going to have something to say about this one. He'll be fired up for the fixture. Score prediction, I'm going to go 2-1 Hull in that game, which will be a massive result for them going into the international break. Next up to Hillsborough for Sheffield Wednesday up against Coventry. Wednesday continuing to put in really spirited performances on the pitch, and they were unfortunate not to leave St Andrews with all 3 points. It was only thanks to a Damari Gray 99th minute equaliser that they didn't leave with all 3 points, but the backdrop is still really chaotic at Hillsborough. Once again, players and staff haven't been paid on time, and it seems inevitable that they will be handed some sort of a point deduction production as a consequence of that. And I do feel like that negativity could bleed onto the pitch, despite the players continuing to put in a shift week in, week out. And this fixture, I mean, it is a very difficult one. I know that Coventry are second in the Championship right now, but performance-wise, I think there's an argument to be made that Cov are maybe the best team in the Championship at the moment. They've scored 7 goals across their last 2 matches, put 4 goals past Millwall in midweek. Really good showing from Frank Lampard's men. They're creating more chances than any other side in the Championship. You'd back them to have a lot of the ball in this game. It's just a question of whether or not Wednesday can disrupt them enough and pick their moments to go forward and catch them cold. And to be fair, Cov have had a few frustrating draws on the road already this season. I just think their quality will come through in this game though. Score prediction, going to go 3-1. Coventry in that game. Next up to Ashton Gate for Bristol City up against Queen's Park Rangers. Both sides coming off the back of draws in midweek. Bristol City having that draw against Ipswich, which on paper I don't think is a bad result, especially with some of the injuries that they've got in that squad at the moment. I think it was Atkinson going off with another injury. That certainly won't serve them well going into this weekend. QPR unbeaten in 5, albeit midweek maybe was a bit of an opportunity missed there. A 0-0 draw against Oxford felt like a bit of a frustrating one. They had plenty of the ball but couldn't really break Oxford down and craft out that many clear-cut chances. Honestly, a game I could see going either way. Both teams haven't given away loads to the opposition recently, but equally neither are firing on all cylinders in the final third at the moment. I think these two could cancel each other out. Score prediction, I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw between those two. After that, to Pride Park for Derby up against Southampton. Another draw for Derby in midweek, 1-1 against Charlton. Now means they've drawn 50% of their matches so far this season. The biggest issue that I think the Rams have had up until this point is just being really slow out the traps. They've conceded first in 6 of their 8 Championship matches so far this season, which means they're constantly playing catch up, usually going into the second half, a goal down and chasing the match. That's something that absolutely has to be rectified if Derby want to push on. I do think that Eustace should be getting more out of that squad right now. Southampton, they've been a tough one to call in recent weeks, it has to be said. A big win for them in midweek away at Sheff Utd. Going there in, not the easiest of circumstances. I think they have improved since Wilder's been back at Sheff Utd, so Southampton going there and winning was no easy feat. A couple of well-taken goals from Ross Stewart, the second in particular. I still think you can get at them though defensively, Southampton, and I'd fancy Derby to cause them a few issues from set pieces and things like that especially. No Ben Brereton Diaz for Derby for this game as he's obviously on loan from Southampton. I wouldn't be surprised if this one finishes level. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw, probably with Southampton to take the lead and Derby to get back into it later on. Next up to the Den for Millwall up against West Brom, and there has to be some sort of reaction from Millwall in this game, coming off the back of a hammering in midweek, losing 4-0 against Coventry. And it does have to be said that home form is becoming a real issue for Millwall. I know they won that game fairly recently at home against Watford, but even that one wasn't a vintage performance, and other than that, they've lost all of their other 3 games at the Den this season. 4 home matches for Millwall this season, 1 goal scored, 9 conceded. That's a worrying pattern that we'll need sorting out sooner rather than later if Millwall want to be in this playoff conversation come the end of the season. For West Brom, they're still not scoring loads of goals, but they're continuing to pick up points on a regular basis. Midweek being another example of that. In the end, it was just the 1 goal, which was good enough to win that game against Norwich. That won't always be the case. But 14 points from your first 8 matches, I don't think that's a record to be sniffed at. West Brom have been pretty handy on the road so far this season as well. No club has picked up more points in away matches in their first 4 matches than the Baggies have, and for that reason I think I'm fancying them for another marginal 1-0 win on the road here. Just feels like Millwall obviously aren't at 100% strength at the moment, and a good side like West Brom coming to town, I think they could just edge this one. Next up to Fratton Park for Portsmouth up against Middlesbrough. Both sides coming off the back of draws in midweek. Pompey's game against Watford was a bit of a mixed bag. First half looked really promising and looked like they might have run away with that game until Watford made the changes they did at half-time, and then suddenly the momentum completely flipped on its head. Fratton Park was a real fortress for Portsmouth last season. It doesn't quite feel like it's had that same intimidation factor this season though. Like, they've only won one of their first 4 home matches, and this game against top of the league Middlesbrough will not be easy. For Borough, it is now 3 draws from their last 4 matches, still sitting pretty at the top of the Championship, but they've got Coventry closing them down pretty rapidly. Honestly, I think this is another one of those games which could stink of a draw. A win would be welcome for both. Do you know what? Just to make things interesting at the top of the Championship, I'll say Portsmouth get back to winning ways here and hand Middlesbrough their first loss in the process. I believe Pompey won this fixture last season. I'm going to go 2-1. Just for that reason. After that, to deep delve for Preston up against Charlton. 2 sides who have started this season really well. Both teams unbeaten in 4 matches coming into this one. Maybe a bit of disappointment with both sides coming out of midweek as well, with obviously Charlton taking the lead against Derby. That game finished 1-1 in the end. Preston having a 2-goal lead against Hull, ultimately for that one to end level as well. So both sides probably wanting 3 points in this fixture, but it does scream of quite a tight game of football, in my opinion at least. I think Charlton have been quite tough to get at. Crucially, Charlton don't really demand the ball, especially away from home. They're quite happy to sit off you and let the opposition play. Like, away from home so far this season, Charlton have only averaged about 42% possession. Stereotypically, these are the sorts of matches that Preston do struggle in at home, when the opposition gives us the ball and it's up to us to sort of break them down, and we're not really the ones going and pressing the opposition and forcing them into mistakes and things like that. I've seen this sort of game play out too many times at Deepdale over the past few years. This will not be easy from a North End perspective. I think that both sides are probably a bit better without the ball, if that makes sense, and playing on the weaknesses of the opposition. So I do think we could get a case in this match where both sides maybe cancel each other out. Bit of quality on either end of the pitch could win it, but score prediction, I'm fancying a draw. 1-1 I'm saying between us two. Next up to the Liberty for Swansea against Leicester. I'm not gonna lie, from everything we've learnt about these two sides so far this season, this game absolutely stinks of a draw, doesn't it? Leicester have now drawn their last 4 consecutive matches. That one in midweek against Wrexham I think was a frustrating one, given how much they dominated the ball, got themselves into the lead going into half-time and then couldn't capitalise on it and get that second goal. It feels like maybe there is a bit of an over-reliance maybe on their wide men to get those moments of magic. I know it was obviously Jordan James who scored in midweek, but it's usually Fatou Mavididi who they look towards for those moments. And Mavididi at the moment isn't quite firing on all cylinders, is he? Going up against the Swansea side who got a good win in midweek, to be fair, away at Blackburn. Good away performance. I thought they picked their moments going forward, and it was a lovely goal on the counter to win that game. But with that being said, Swansea have drawn their last 3 consecutive home matches, and Leicester still figuring things out, but chipping away at their points tally. I just think a draw in this one's inevitable. Score prediction, it's going to be another 1-1. Next up to Vicarage Road for Watford up against Oxford. This does feel like a big game for Paolo Pezzolano. We've said it a few times on the channel recently, but it does not feel like that Watford fan base has bought into him. It was a good reaction after a poor first 45 away at Portsmouth in midweek. They got those 2 quick-fire goals in the second half. Ultimately, that game finished level 2-2. They're going up against an Oxford side in this game who got a good point on the road, I thought, in midweek away at QPR. Didn't have a load of attacking intent in that game, but defensively looked really solid like you'd expect from a Gary Rowett sort of side. And in this game here, I think they'll look to make it difficult for Watford. It's just a question of whether or not Oxford have those game-winning players, like I think Watford do when they're at their best. Watford for me this season have played well in sort of like 20-minute patches here and there, and when things are clicking for them, I think they look like a good competent Championship side. But when things aren't working for them, I think they can look really disjointed and a little bit clueless at others. So this is just a question of which Watford side shows up for me personally. To be fair, at home, they have been decent value for money with 7 points from their first 4 home matches. But you just don't know which version of Watford's going to show up week to week. Score prediction here. Draw wouldn't surprise me. I'm just going to say with the attacking quality of Watford, maybe one of those players makes the difference here, and I'll go for a 2-1 Watford home win. And then we're finishing it off on the big one. On Sunday, it's the East Anglian derby. It's Ipswich going up against Norwich. Norwich are 14 games unbeaten in this fixture. The last time Ipswich were victorious over Norwich, you're going all the way back to 2009. That's how long it's been. It does have to be said, though, the vibes at both clubs, they're definitely higher at Ipswich right now. And I know they've not had the ideal start to the season. They're coming off the back of a draw in midweek away at Bristol City. But it at least feels like there are some shoots of positivity, and Kieran McKenna's obviously still got the backing of that fan base, and it just feels like they'll be a bit more up for this game than Norwich, who it feels like are really down in the dumps at the moment. Booed at full time after that loss at home against West Brom. To be honest, Norwich are probably quite glad that this game's not taking place at Carrow Road, because they've lost all 4 of their home matches so far this season. On the road, Norwich have been alright. Like, they picked up 8 points from their first 4 away matches. I do think that they got a bit fortunate, though, it has to be said, in the last 2 away games, especially away at Stoke and Coventry, considering how many shots they faced over both those matches. The fact that they left with a 1-1 draw in both of them maybe was a bit fortunate. But would I be at all surprised if this game unfolds like Ipswich have the majority of the ball, have about 25 plus shots, but then it ultimately finishes 1-1? That would not surprise me whatsoever, especially given the history of this fixture. I've been wrong before back in Ipswich to beat Norwich. I remember doing it in previous years, and it never comes off, does it? But I reckon this year, it might be the year. I've just not been encouraged with what I've seen from Norwich recently. Score prediction, putting my neck on the line, I'm going 2-1 Ipswich in that game to finally end the East Anglian hoodoo. But guys, that will wrap it up for today's video. Thank you very much for tuning in. Make sure to drop your score predictions in the comments down below. Very intrigued to see which way you guys are swaying for these games. If you did go on to enjoy, please do drop a like. Other than that, I'll catch you all in the next one.